Hey everyone, welcome. We're diving into the world of short films today. We've got some excerpts from a new filmmaking guidebook, and
I'm excited to dig into it with you.
yeah, this guidebook is it's packed with interesting stuff.
It has a lot of great stuff in there. I'm happy to help kind of break it down.
Yeah, awesome. So, okay, it talks a lot about short films, but
hmm
what even is that? Is there like a real definition? Is it just like longer than a YouTube video? I mean,
Right.
what are we talking about here?
That's a great question. And actually, even seasoned filmmakers kind of debate on the exact definition
Okay.
because there's no like rule book. But this guidebook, they say, the general consensus is if it's under 40 minutes,
Okay,
it's a short film. And you can really pack a lot
that makes sense.
into that amount of time.
Yeah, yeah. Now, one thing that jumped out at me in this guidebook was the role of the creative producer.
Yeah.
And I was like, what is that? It sounds like they do a little bit of everything.
Yeah, they wear many hats, it seems.
Yeah.
You could think of it like a conductor of an orchestra, but instead of instruments, they're orchestrating the entire film.
Okay.
So from finding the story to securing the funding to working with the director.
So they're not just like the money person.
Right. They're very hands-on. This book actually talks about how they even work with the director to cast actors
Oh, wow.
to find the right people who embody the characters.
Yeah.
So it is a very hands-on creative position.
That's intense. Okay, now this guidebook also gets into the evolution of filmmaking technology.
Right.
And I mean, wow, what a wild ride it's been.
It has been. Yeah.
We've gone from these like massive cameras to,
Yeah.
I don't even know, what are we using these days?
Yeah, it's crazy to think about, back in the day,
Yeah.
these huge cameras that you couldn't really move around.
Right.
The introduction of 35 millimeter portable cameras changed everything.
Okay.
This guidebook talks about the French New Wave movement as a great example because they were able to take their cameras out to the streets
Oh, cool.
and capture this raw energy
Let's see.
that wasn't possible before.
So it was like a filmmaking revolution.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And then
Okay, and
and then you've got the digital age.
oh, yeah, that must have just like blown the doors wide open.
Absolutely. And this guidebook actually points to Toy Story back in 1995 as a major turning point because that was the first fully computer-generated film.
That makes sense.
And it just completely changed the game. And suddenly, all these tools and techniques that were only available to these big-budget studios
All right.
were available to everyone.
Wow.
It really leveled the playing field.
So digital filmmaking really kind of like opened it up for everyone.
Mm.
Okay, cool. Speaking of game changers, this book talks about drones, virtual production, and AI as the next big things.
Yeah.
And I can definitely say I've seen some really cool drone shots
Oh, yeah.
lately in movies and stuff. So
Yeah, drones have become like essential, for filmmakers. They can get these really amazing aerial shots that were just so expensive in the past.
Okay.
Very difficult. And one thing that's interesting that the guidebook mentions is that now if you have a drone and it's under 250 grams,
Right.
you don't need any special training or registration if it doesn't have a camera attached.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
So you're saying anybody can just be walking around on set with a drone?
Well, I mean, there's obviously safety precautions to take.
Right.
But for low-budget filmmakers,
Yeah.
now they have access to these shots that they wouldn't have had access to before.
That's incredible. Okay. What about virtual production? What is that?
So imagine like filming on a set surrounded by these giant LED screens
Okay.
that are displaying these real-time 3D environments.
Oh, wow.
So you're stepping into like a video game, but you're making a movie.
That's wild.
It is. And the book mentions Game of Thrones used this a lot.
Really?
Yeah. And it wasn't just for like the fantasy sequences and stuff.
Wow.
It's also incredibly sustainable.
Oh, cool.
And speaking of sustainability, this book actually dives into how filmmakers are minimizing their impact.
Awesome. I love that. So are we talking like solar-powered cameras?
Yeah.
What are we doing?
Not quite.
Okay.
But they do talk about LED lighting,
Yeah.
which uses way less energy
Right.
and sourcing materials locally to cut down on transportation.
Okay. So it's like about making those conscious choices.
Exactly. Finding those creative solutions that benefit both the planet and the budget.
I like that.
And speaking of creative solutions, this is where AI is coming in.
Okay. So AI in filmmaking.
Yeah.
It sounds a little sci-fi, right? Is this guidebook saying robots are going to be directing movies soon or?
Not quite yet, but they do bring up a really good point about AI and ethics. The guidebook author actually calls consciousness, quote unquote, an unexplained hard problem when talking about if AI can really fully replace people. So right now, though, it seems like it's more about how AI can help us, assist us.
Okay, so what can it actually do for filmmakers?
Well, it's already being used to analyze scripts, believe it or not, and even suggest, like, plot points
Wow.
or different character arcs.
But you still need a human to, like, make it good.
Right, exactly. This book really stresses that AI is a tool, not a replacement. It's
Yeah.
like having an extra brain in the room to bounce ideas off of.
I like that.
And you know, one thing that this book really emphasizes that's important is understanding genre,
Okay.
and not just like horror, comedy. They're talking about within those genres, what are the conventions
Got it.
that the audience expects?
All right, so if you're making sci-fi, you better have some spaceships, right?
Exactly. Don't disappoint the audience. But also, how can you use those conventions
Yeah.
to surprise the audience?
Yeah.
So it's walking that fine line.
Okay. Now, before we get to actually making the movie, this book mentions pre-production.
Yeah.
What is that?
So think about it like laying the groundwork
Okay.
for a skyscraper. You wouldn't just start building, you need the foundation.
Right.
So this is where you take that script from the page and really start making a plan.
Okay, so are we talking like budgets and locations and schedules and...
All of that. It's assembling the team, securing those locations, all those details that can really make or break a film. But it's also still a creative phase. The guidebook talks about how the director and the writer will actually work really closely in this phase to fine-tune the script.
Got it.
Make sure their visions are aligned.
So you're not like rewriting while you're on set.
Exactly. And speaking of being on set, we got to talk about casting,
Okay.
because this guidebook really gets into it.
So casting seems pretty straightforward. Find an actor who looks the part, can act, and that's it, right?
Well, it's a lot more than ticking boxes.
Okay.
This book really emphasizes finding actors who embody the essence
Okay.
of the characters. It's those nuances of their personality that they can bring,
Got it.
that depth to the roles. The director might even choose someone that doesn't fit the initial description
Okay.
if they bring something unexpected to the role.
Interesting. And what about chemistry? Like if two actors,
Oh, huge!
they have to be on screen together.
They actually do what they call chemistry reads,
Okay.
where the actors will audition together to see how their energies work together.
Interesting.
Are they looking for those sparks, those connections that really make the audience believe in those relationships?
It's like actor matchmaking.
Right, exactly.
Okay. What about those actors who have to film a scene that's a little, you know,
Yeah, it can get a little tricky.
yeah. What about that?
You're right. Those scenes require a lot more sensitivity, a lot more trust. And the book really emphasizes clear communication, making sure there's consent.
Right.
And even more and more productions are actually hiring intimacy coordinators
Okay.
who specialize in helping to choreograph and really oversee these kinds of scenes.
I see. To make sure that everyone feels safe. Okay. That makes sense. Now, pre-production looks a little different for documentaries.
Right, because you don't have that fictional script that you're working with.
Right.
So where do you start? Well, it often starts with research.
Okay.
You're diving deep into a topic, you're finding the stories, you're finding the people.
It's like you're capturing the world that's already there instead of creating your own.
Exactly. And just like with fictional films, building trust is so important.
Right.
This guidebook really stresses making sure that you're communicating with the people participating in your documentary.
Yeah. Make sure everyone feels good about it.
Exactly.
Okay. Now, what about the look of the film?
Well, that's where the art director comes in.
Okay.
And that role's crucial, both for fictional films and documentaries.
Got it.
They are creating the world that story inhabits.
So, if the director is kind of like the architect of the story, the art director is like the architect of the visuals.
Ooh, I like that. I like that a lot. And this guidebook actually mentions how they'll create mood boards, they'll do sketches, even 3D models.
Wow.
To kind of convey their ideas, everything from colors to what the set looks like, the costumes, the props.
Okay.
It's creating that language.
Very cool.
Yeah.
Now, what about the actual filming of it all? That's where the DP comes in.
Yes, the director of photography, exactly.
Okay.
They work really closely with the director
Okay.
to determine the overall look of the film. They experiment with camera angles, with different lenses, with lighting.
So there's a lot that goes into it. It's not just like pointing and shooting.
No, not at all. This book actually dedicates a whole section to sound design in pre-production.
Oh, wow. Okay. See, and that's something I think a lot of people watching movies just kind of take for granted. Like, I never think about the sound,
Right.
but it's so important.
It's so crucial for that immersive experience.
Yeah.
They actually will research sound libraries for different effects, maybe compose original music,
Wow.
experiment with microphones, recording techniques.
Wow, I never knew all that went into it.
Yeah, it's really interesting. They actually might even do what's called a sound map, which is like a visual representation of how they imagine the sound unfolding.
Wow. That's really cool.
And we can't forget about risk assessment.
Okay, so that's got to be like making sure people don't trip over chords.
That's part of it, but it's also about thinking about, okay, what are the hazards?
Yeah.
Do we have a plan in place? What about the weather? What if an actor gets hurt during a stunt?
Got it.
So it's about keeping everyone safe.
Okay, that makes sense. Is there anything legal we need to think about?
Well, yeah, actually. Music.
Oh, right. You can't just use any song.
Right. And this book actually breaks down the difference between performance rights,
Okay.
which is like playing the music out loud, versus synchronization rights, which is what you need if you're going to use the song in your film.
So if I want to use like the hottest Beyonce track,
Right.
I got to call her up and get permission.
Well, you might have to talk to her publishers, her record label.
Okay.
It can get complicated, yeah. This book offers some advice on how to navigate all that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Good to know. Better be safe than sorry.
Exactly.
Okay. Any other important documents or anything like that we should keep in mind?
They do mention the production Bible, which is really helpful.
Bible.
It sounds very, very official, but this book actually describes it as a document that outlines every single aspect of the film. Everything from the story synopsis, the characters, locations, the shooting schedule.
It's like the Bible of the film.
Exactly.
It's got everything in there.
It does. Very, very detailed.
Yeah.
Which can be annoying but helpful
Got
to
it.
keep things organized. It's like a roadmap for the whole thing.
I like it. What about the call sheet?
Right.
Is that important?
They actually provide a bunch of sample call sheets in this book, which is cool. It's a daily breakdown
Okay.
of what's happening on set. So when everyone needs to be there, what scenes are being shot, even when the meal breaks are...
Oh, now you're talking my language. The food, that's important.
Oh, absolutely. Especially on a long day of filming. They actually even dedicate a section of this book to catering
Okay.
and how to stay on budget. They even suggest fun stuff like potlucks, which I think is a fun idea.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay, so we've got the crew fed, we've got our call sheets, we've got our Bibles, we're ready to go. Cameras are rolling, right?
Almost. This guidebook also highlights the importance of the marked up script.
What's that?
It's basically the DP's Bible.
Right.
So it's a copy of the script, but it's been annotated. So they've added camera angles, lenses, lighting setups, all the technical stuff to really bring that director's vision to life.
It's like the treasure map to get those perfect shots.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And speaking of perfect shots, this book actually provides a little checklist
Okay.
for location scouting, things to
Sounds
keep
great.
in mind, sound quality, the lighting,
Right. Yeah.
even just the logistics. How do we get everyone there?
That's a good point.
Yeah.
Okay, so we scouted the location, we got our scripts, we're ready to go, we're yelling action.
We made it.
Okay. But wait, the actors, they need a little direction.
No, they do. And this book actually gives some really good advice for actors.
Okay. Like what?
Well, being prepared,
Okay.
which sounds obvious, but knowing your lines, understanding the character's motivation, being ready for anything to change.
Because that happens all the time, right?
Oh, yeah.
In filmmaking.
Flexibility is key.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay. So the cinematographer, now that's the person who's actually behind the camera, right?
Mhm.
So what is their role like on set?
So they're responsible for bringing those visuals to life. They choose the lenses, frame the shots, they adjust the lighting,
So they work very closely with the director.
very closely with the director to make sure everything is perfect.
Wow. So they need to really know their stuff.
Oh, absolutely. Cameras, lenses, lighting, all of it.
Okay. What about that thing we were talking about earlier, 3-point lighting? Is that part of it?
Yeah, so the guidebook talks about common lighting techniques,
Okay.
and that is a classic. It involves using a key light, a fill light, and a backlight
Okay.
to create dimension and really properly light the subject.
Got it. Okay. Now we can't forget about sound. We got to have good sound.
We do. It's so important. They are on set capturing everything, the
Right.
dialogue, the ambient sounds. They use all kinds of microphones, recording equipment, techniques.
So they're like the sonic architects of the film.
I love that. I love that. And they work really closely again with the director to make sure the audio matches the visuals, to really make sure they're complementing each other.
Wow. Okay, so we got the lighting, we've got the sound. What else do we need on set?
Well, We can't forget about makeup and wardrobe.
Right, because that
Yes.
completely transforms the actors.
Completely. The makeup artists, they use their skills to age the actors, create special effects, even enhance their features.
It's incredible what they can do these days with all that.
It is. It's really an art form.
Yeah.
And then you've got the wardrobe department. They're carefully picking out the costumes, thinking about the character's personality.
Oh, wow. So it's not just about looking good. It's about, like, telling the story through the clothes.
Exactly, those visual cues.
Got it.
And while we're talking about details, we got to mention the props department.
Oh, yeah. Props are important.
They're so important. They really make a scene come alive. Everything from a coffee cup to a complex piece of machinery.
Right.
And the props master finds all of that, organizes it,
Wow.
makes sure it's all perfectly placed.
It's a lot of pressure.
It is, it is. But then, taking it a step further,
Okay.
you've got special effects.
Ooh, yes. The explosions, the car chases. Is that all done on set or?
Well, it depends. The guidebook actually talks about how they use a combination of practical effects,
Okay.
like real explosions and things,
Okay.
and digital effects, like CGI.
Okay, so these a little bit of both
A little bit of both, yeah.
to make it look really
Really
human.
bring those moments to life. And speaking of bringing things to life, we need to talk about post-production.
Okay, yes. This is where it all comes together,
Yeah.
right? Like, this is where you take all that raw footage and turn it into a movie.
This is where the magic happens.
Okay.
You take all the puzzle pieces and you assemble that masterpiece.
Okay, so what's the first step?
Well, first, you got to log and transfer all the footage.
Okay.
Sounds boring, but it's important.
Yeah, I bet.
You're basically creating a library of footage.
Okay, and then once you've got your library, then what?
Then the editor steps in.
Okay, the editor. So they're the ones who, like, craft the story, right?
Exactly. They're looking at pacing, at detail. How do we keep people on the edge of their seats?
Got it.
They work really closely with the director,
Okay.
and they actually use all kinds of cool techniques. This guidebook mentions things like cutting on action,
Okay.
using cutaways, different transitions.
Wow. So there's, like, a real art to editing.
There really is.
Okay, and then after the editor's done, then what?
Well, then it's time for sound design.
Oh, right. We talked about that a little bit in pre-production.
Right, we did touch upon it.
But this is where it all comes together.
This is where those soundscapes come to life. This book gets into adding sound effects, creating the musical score, mixing it all together.
Oh, wow.
And they even talk about Foley, which I think is really interesting.
Foley, what is that?
So imagine like someone rustling a leather jacket
Okay.
in a studio to recreate the sound of a character putting on a coat. That's Foley?
Oh, okay.
It's wise.
So all those, like, really realistic sounds, the footsteps and stuff, that's done after.
A lot of it, yeah.
That's incredible. I would never have thought about that.
Yeah, it's amazing.
Okay, cool. So what else happens in post?
Color correction.
Oh, right. So this is where you make the colors look all pretty.
Well, it's more than that. It's
Right.
really about establishing the visual style of the film.
Yeah.
This guidebook talks about how these color correctors use software to fine-tune things. Brightness, contrast, saturation, hues.
Oh, wow.
It's amazing what they can do.
Okay, so it's like more than just making it look pretty. It's like really making those colors tell a story.
Exactly.
Okay, so we've gone from, like, that initial idea all the way to getting it out there.
We did it.
We made a movie. Ready to talk about sharing your short film with the world.
Absolutely. Getting those films out there is the goal.
Yes, distribution. That's the
Yeah.
final hurdle, right?
It is. And as we've mentioned, there are so many more options for filmmakers these days.
Yeah, for sure. What are the different ways you can get your short film out into the world?
Okay, well, there's the traditional way, the theatrical release.
Right, the big screen.
But for short films, it's tricky. Those big theaters want those big Hollywood movies. For independent filmmakers, especially for short films, it's just really difficult.
Yeah, that makes sense. Your short film is probably not going to be playing next to the next superhero blockbuster, right?
Probably not, no.
Okay, so what's a better option?
Well, film festivals are still a really great way to go, especially for short films.
Okay.
You get that exposure, you can win awards, you might even get a distribution deal.
So they can really help get your foot in the door.
They can, definitely.
Yeah.
And this guidebook actually mentions one in particular, Clermont-Ferrand International Short Film Festival.
That sounds pretty important.
It's a big one. It's in France. It's known for being really selective, and they show some amazing films.
Ooh la la. Okay, so, and here in the U.S., the Palm Springs International Short Fest is another good one. But don't forget about all the online options.
Oh, right. You can reach a huge audience online.
Exactly. YouTube, Vimeo, even those streaming services. It's really changed things for independent filmmakers.
It's amazing you don't need a big studio to get your film seen anymore.
Exactly. But with so many options, it can be tough to know where to start. This guidebook, they talk about really knowing your film.
Okay, like we were saying, know your audience.
Exactly. Think about who you made this film for, where do they hang out online, what kind of films do they like.
It's all about connecting with your audience.
It is.
Wow. Okay, so we've covered it all. From that first spark of an idea all the way to getting your finished film in front of an audience.
We really have. It's quite a journey. It is. I wanted to circle back to sustainability. It's so cool to see how important that's becoming in the film industry.
It really is, and this guidebook actually talks about it a lot.
Okay, good. So what are some of the things that filmmakers are doing to be more sustainable?
Well, a big one is energy, thinking about all the lights and equipment they use.
Yeah, that makes sense.
So using LED lights has been a huge help.
Okay, so like swapping out the old bulbs for LEDs, that kind of thing.
Exactly. This book even talks about using renewable energy sources, like maybe having solar panels on set.
Oh, cool. Now that's thinking outside the box.
Oh,
Or inside the film set box.
exactly. And of course, it's not just about energy, it's also about waste.
Oh, right. Yeah. There's going to be a lot of trash in a movie set.
There can be, but this guidebook really encourages filmmakers to think about that. Like even simple things like reusable water bottles and coffee mugs.
Okay, that makes sense.
Having recycling bins, composting food scraps from catering.
So it's really just about being mindful, it sounds like.
Yeah, absolutely. And the guidebook also talks about buying local whenever possible.
Oh, yeah, to help cut down on transportation.
Right. And to support local businesses.
I like that.
And, they make a really interesting point in this book.
Okay.
It's not just about those practical things. Sustainability can also be part of the story you're telling.
Oh, that's interesting. So like incorporating environmental themes into the films themselves.
Yeah. Filmmakers are using their platform to raise awareness, to get people thinking differently.
That's awesome. So as we wrap up, any final words of wisdom for our listeners out there who are ready to start making their own short films?
Filmmaking is all about collaboration, about passion, about never giving up. Embrace those challenges, be proud of what you create, and never stop learning.
That's fantastic advice. Okay, and with that, we'll wrap up this deep dive. Thanks for joining us, everyone, and keep those creative sparks flying.